Let me share my screen. All right. All right, let's see, let me bring up the chat. I'll just leave the chat up and running just in case folks have questions. I'll just leave it here on the side. Let me hide this. Okay. All right, anybody have any questions before we get started?
When will we be able to see the answers to the quiz?
I'll make them available tonight.
Good.
So you can take a look at that. Yeah. Just a few more minutes. Let me see. This is section 2. All right, let's get started. Let's see. We are entering the 4th week of our course, and we just introduced on Monday, earlier this week, we talked about ES6 or ECMAScript 6, which is the version of JavaScript that we'll be going to be using for the rest of the semester. And today we're going to introduce the use of ECMA6, ES6 in the context of building. Now we have been, in the last couple of weeks, we've been introducing HTML, CSS to create static content. We then introduced JavaScript and jQuery as libraries that allow you to manipulate the DOM of web applications so that we can dynamically render them and programmatically decide what is it that we want to show on the screen. And we saw that JavaScript had somewhat fragmented based on various versions of the browsers, the different vendors, and the different versions of the language as they have been evolving over time, and which makes it hard for developers to make applications that are consistent across multiple browsers, across multiple vendors. And so jQuery kind of solved that by providing a somewhat like a virtual browser, right? Where you, instead of coding down to the low-level version of JavaScript, right, where you are directly manipulating the DOM, instead you can code to jQuery, which provided somewhat like a very thin veneer on top of the low-level browser, right? You can use the high-level APIs that they provide, so that you don't have to worry about the underlying idiosyncrasies of a particular browser, right? jQuery would translate your invocations to their API down to the basic low-level JavaScript, right? Well, today we're going to introduce another layer of abstraction on top of that, right? So that's which is going to be React.js, right? It's a library that allows us to think about a page or an application as a collaboration of multiple functions that allows us to break up a large application into smaller units, right? Reusable components that you can then use to build, from smaller pieces into, ever more complex, even more complex applications, right? And we're going to be using ES6 that we introduced earlier this week. And we're actually going to be using it today to build React applications. Okay. So anyways, that's the plan. We'll introduce the third assignment today, and which will give us an opportunity to practice the use of ES6 and building React.js applications. All right, so that's the plan. Any questions before we get started? Okay. All right. All right, so we had, let's see, let me close this. We had created a React.js project last time around. I believe it's this one. Yeah, it's this one, right? And we had used it to just play around with ES6, right? And so these are some of the code that we put around earlier this week. Okay, so let's close that. We're not gonna use that. Instead, we're gonna focus on looking at ES6 use in the context of React.js. Okay, so we'll see. Let's we had created this this application using npm. We had installed Node.js, and with Node.js you get a whole bunch of executables. One of them is obviously Node, which allows you to execute just plain old JavaScript. npm, which allows you to install libraries, right, download packages, and copy them locally on your machine. Now, and also npx, which is the executable version of npm, right, that can download packages but also execute them locally, which we use to create this application. We use the create React app. Okay, so there's a set of slides here that I put together for you that introduce React.js and works through the process that we went over earlier this week to create the application, and it creates the simplest of React applications, right? We use npx to create an application using this command, and I called it, my wonderful React application. You should use the naming convention that we've been following, right? Which starts with webdev dash the semester. That's what we use, right? This is the naming convention that we use. Webdev dash the semester, spring 21, then your section, then either your username or some kind of identifying name, first name, last name, client, and React, right? So don't use this funny name over here, right? So, but this is how you would create an application, and then you can cd into it and then run it by using npm start. So npx to execute a command, a module, npm for installing, for running, for debugging, for running unit tests, things like that, for managing packages, right? So anyway, so if you run it, the entry point for the application is this index.js, and we briefly went over this, right? Where index.js is the entry point of the application. Well, really the entry point is this index.html, right? That declares this root ID, root element, where everything is going to be injected. And the way it's injected is through this index.js. Index.js is the one who injects content into the root. There it is, right? Using this function render, right? This render function is from this library over here, and let's take a look at it just quickly how it might work, right? This is something very similar to what you would do using jQuery, right? In jQuery, if you remember, you can get a hold of you can refer to an element in the DOM, right, by ID, by class, right, and then you can append to that content, right? And we've done it for the assignments and all last week, where we would retrieve the T body and then append multiple rows to that T body, right, a table body. Well, this is something similar, but it's another API. Basically, notice that it takes two arguments, this first argument and this second argument. And the second argument says, where do you want to inject some content, whereas the first argument is the content you want to inject, right? So two arguments. So some content, some HTML looking thing, right, that you want to inject where? into this document, into this element in the screen, in the DOM. Okay. So yeah, so yeah, it's, I mean, you could imagine being able to do that with jQuery, right? So this React DOM is a renderer, knows how to render the DOM. Okay, so it's a React DOM renderer, knows how to render React applications into HTML DOM. Notice that the two libraries that are part of this index.js, the first one is kind of the core functionality of the React library. Okay, but then there's here a second library also from React that knows how to specifically target browsers, right? It knows how to render in the browsers. And notice that it's not part of the core library, right? It's separate. And the reason is that React actually can render into render not only browsers, but it can render into mobile applications. It could render also on desktop, native desktop applications, right? So there are other renderers, right, that know how to render a content, not using HTML, but using, you know, iOS, the buttons in iOS, or the drop downs in iOS, or the same elements, but in Android, okay? Or it also allows you to target, you know, tablets or even desktop applications where you can use native desktop operating, you know, depending on your operating system, use those components. So this one is specific for rendering DOM elements, right, where you provide, you know, HTML-looking things, right, HTML-looking content, and you can target an item, an element in the HTML DOM. Okay. And we saw that the actual content that was rendered was actually here, right, where you have a JavaScript that this is the actual content that gets rendered, right? So if you run it, we can run it. We can add a run configuration here, a npm configuration. To run it, you can run the npm start. Right, so apply, save. So this is as if I was running npm start from the command line, which is this right here. Create a run configuration. So if I click that, it does the npm start. Well, actually, this is using yarn instead of npm, and it brings up the application. This is the default boilerplate application. Okay. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be replacing this boilerplate application with our own content, right? So let me show you the simplest of application. Well, let's build a hello world, right? And that is documented here in these pages, right? Creating a React hello world, right? So let's do that. Let me just demonstrate real quick how easy it is to use React. Okay, it's one of the simplest libraries. Has a very shallow learning curve, right? So let's take a look at this, right? So basically, what we've got here, what we have here is the entry point index.js. So it's rendering this here, right? So let's replace this with something of our own. Okay, let me just show you. Here I could have maybe h1 hello world. Okay, so you recognize it definitely, right? It's just h1. And if you look at the content, notice that if you refresh, notice that indeed is what you would expect, right? It's rendering the h1 and the hello world. Okay, now this content could become fairly complex, right? It could be you know, the table component that we developed for the user admin for the assignment, right? It could be, we can embed it all in there. But what React allows you to do is that if things start to become fairly complex, right, what React allows you to do is just take that complexity, wrap it inside of a function, and put it in a separate file, right? And then you can import that file, right? And then, you know, build your large application in terms of smaller pieces. Yes, and you do that by putting it in separate files and then importing those files so that we can use them here. All right. One thing that I'm not sure if we got to install Bootstrap. Did we install Bootstrap yesterday? I forget. I don't believe so. Bootstrap. No, we didn't. So let's install Bootstrap as well. So any new packages, anything you install with npm is installed in these node_modules directory right here. See that? So let's install Bootstrap. And in the slides, I walk you through doing that. Let's see. Actually, no, I don't do that here. I actually do it in the assignment. Yeah, in the assignment, we walked you through doing that, right? Creating, downloading Node.js, creating a new project, installing Bootstrap. Let's do that. Let's install Bootstrap. So we can do that in the terminal here. All these commands are run from the command line and from the root of your project. So this root right here, okay, wherever you created it, and we are now at the root of the project. So let's run Bootstrap. So that's going to take a while. It's going to download Bootstrap, and it's going to copy all the files for Bootstrap. It's going to put them under the node_modules. Okay, let's see if it already should have started copying. Let's see, Bootstrap. No, not yet. Yeah, so it's still downloading any dependencies that Bootstrap might depend on. So let that go for a while. Let me introduce to you the assignment that we're going to be working in the next week or so, maybe almost 2 weeks. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be installing Bootstrap, Font Awesome. We're also going to be installing React Router. And React Router, right, it's going to be a library that's going to allow us to implement navigation. Now, navigation in the classic sense entails clicking a hyperlink, right, and then replacing the URL and pointing to another document, right? And like, for instance, when we navigate from the home page to the login screen to the profile screen, right, usually it means that you've clicked on a hyperlink and then the current document gets dumped, gets thrown away, and gets completely replaced by the other document where you navigate, right? That's the classical way of implementing navigation. And we're going to abandon that. And instead, we're going to be implementing single-page applications, right? The single-page application mechanism is that we never leave that single page that we load, right? Instead, we load that one single page, and then because we have an index, we have a root, we have a div that we know about, we can always inject and replace that content dynamically, right? We can swap out content, we can swap out the login screen, remove it, and then dynamically add the profile screen, remove it, then put the home screen, and we can inject the content back and forth programmatically and decide what is that we want to put in there, okay? And that's what React Router is going to allow us to do. Even though we are in the same screen, in the same single page, we want to be able to show different screens, right, on that page to give the sense of navigation between different screens. So React Router is going to allow us to do that. So we're going to install Bootstrap, which we are. That's what it's installing, still going. Font Awesome and React Router DOM. And we're going to add them to the index.js, and we'll do that in a minute. Okay, so we are going to, what we're going to implement is the course manager that we got started, in a prior assignment, and we're going to expand on that, right? We're going to make it dynamic now, right? The one we built a couple of weeks ago was completely static, right? It was just showing a table. It was responsive, right? But none of the buttons actually worked. But this time around, it is gonna work, right? We're going to make this for real. Okay, is this done? Okay, it's done. All right. So meanwhile, let's get Font Awesome. Let's install Font Awesome as well. Okay, let that go. Let that go. So we're going to implement using the same HTML that you developed a couple of weeks ago. Feel free to reuse that. Just bring it over, okay? And you're going to break it up into multiple components, okay? So it's not going to be one monolithic HTML document. It's going to be broken up into smaller pieces, right? Is that done? Yeah. Let's install one more thing. Let's install React Router DOM. Okay. So we're gonna implement this. And what React.js does is it encourages us to take a look at a page like this, right, and start thinking, hey, how can we break this up, right? And so you might start saying, well, maybe we can make a component, right, for the top, right, that has this input field and this button and this bar here, these bars. Then maybe we have another component that deals with this table down here, and then maybe each row can also be a component, right? It starts making you think, right, on how is it that we could build or decompose something as complex as this into smaller reusable components, right? And maybe things that could be reused in other screens, right? For instance, we're also going to build this grid version. We're going to build this grid version of the course manager, right? And we're going to be able to toggle between the two, right? So you can toggle by clicking here. You can toggle into this grid version, and clicking this, it brings you back to the table version, right? So notice that the top bar here kind of looks exactly the same in both layouts. So perhaps it could be a shared component, right, between the two, right? So that you wouldn't need to write it more than once, right? You can embed it in both of them. Well, let's see if it's done installing. Okay, looks like it's done installing. Okay, notice that Bootstrap has been installed under node_modules. Notice that Font Awesome has been installed. If you open it up, you see that the CSS is all there. See that? And Bootstrap is down further. There it is. See that with the CSS. And you can include it in your index.js. You can include it. Let's do that. We can include Bootstrap, distribution, CSS, and then Bootstrap min. There we go. We can also import the Font Awesome, right, the CSS, and all the CSS. There we go. See that? So notice that no longer are we going to be loading this from the HTML. So we're not going to put it in the HTML like we normally do, right? Where you have links. You can do that all from within the index page, index screen, right? You can load CSS files. We have our own index CSS here, right, in the same directory as our index.js file, right? We have CSS, there we go, which doesn't have much. But notice the order in which we declared it. We first declared Bootstrap, Font Awesome, and then index.js in that order, right? So that if we want, we can have in our local index.js CSS, we can override some of the stylings in Bootstrap. Maybe we don't like the rounded corners and we make them straight. Maybe we don't like the coloring, right? We can override all that. So here you have not only can you load CSS, right, but you can also load JavaScript. Again, normally you would load JavaScript, putting a script tag in your HTML. No longer. Instead, we're going to import that JavaScript, right? And in this case, we are importing this app here, or whatever that is. Okay. So let's get back to the example here, and then we can go back to the assignment. This is a hello world, and you can imagine this being something complex, and what Angular promotes. It promotes your reusability, right? Of creating little small components that can then be imported and embedded. So for instance, let me show you this hello world. We can have a component that just does this, right? For instance, let's create a hello JavaScript, and we'll call it hello. Okay, in here, right? All JavaScripts typically will need to import React, right? The core, and then we can declare a function, okay, of the same name of the component that we're creating, and whatever this function returns, okay, it could return maybe this hello world. Let's copy that and let's paste it in here, and then we export it. default hello. Okay, we can import it and say import hello. And now we can use it as a tag. We can create our own tags, right? And what do they do? What do they render? They render whatever they return, whatever that returns. Right? Just like if you do a select in HTML, what does it render? Well, it renders a dropdown, right? If you draw a button, what does it render? Well, it renders a button. So each element, each HTML element renders whatever the browser understands, right? But now you can combine them into much more complex things into an entire application. So would hello be a component? Yes, hello would be one of the simplest components we'll ever see. Okay. Now there are two styles of these components that we're going to be considering, right? They are the functional component, like this one. This is a functional component, and there are also components based on classes. Okay. So let me show you. Let's create another component, and we'll call it hello class. Okay, and we do the same thing. We import the React from the React library, and we're going to create a class. Okay, and the class is going to be class. It'll be called hello class. We're going to extend some behavior so that we can render ourselves from React.component. And React component expects you to implement at least this function called render. And whatever the render function returns, that's what is going to be rendered on the screen. So we're going to return, right? And we can say, here, h1, hello world from class. Okay, we export it. Hello class. So that here in the index, we can now import the hello class and replace this with hello class. There we go. So now when you render it, what you get is instead, can't resolve, blah, 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 React. What am I missing?
I think it's your import.
My import. Mine. Class extends, yada, yada, yada. React, hello. Import. Hello class. Hello class. Interesting. What are you complaining about? Body, nothing is being injected. Hello class. Class, hello class, extends default, return. Hello class, my dot hello class. Interesting, what the heck? Hello class, blah, 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 blah. There's a class, right? Yeah, import class. Extends React component. Weird. Why are you not seeing it? Index.js. Class. Extends React component render return. What did I do different? Open, blah, blah, blah. I think I just did the same thing here. Hello class. Hello React, hello class, extends React component, render, yada, yada, yada. That works fine. Index. Hello class, blah, 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 blah. Dot slash. Ooh. Let me stop this and run it again. Let's see something on the chat. You shouldn't need to rerun the server. Yeah, no, I shouldn't have to. Normally this would not happen. Well, I don't know why. That's weird. Yeah, you should not have to rerun the server. If you do any updates, it should be instantaneous. There we go. Whatever. Okay, so yeah, so this is a class, and you can have so now we have two components. One is based on functions, and the other one is based on class. Right now, the class components are becoming less and less popular, but they're still widely used. And functional components are becoming more and more popular. Right, functional components are much easier to test. They are much more compact, but they do have certain limitations of what you can do with one, but can't do with the other. Okay, but whenever possible, right, it's a good practice to try and implement it as a functional component, right? Also because you can be very, very terse and compact. Let me show you another version for this hello component. Let me comment this out. You can write it using ES6, right? So this becomes const, and then it just becomes this kind of arrow function, yes? And because this is an arrow function, since this is an arrow function, we can rewrite this in a much more terse way, right? Much more compact. Because we only have a single return here, we can actually remove it. So you can remove the return, you can remove the curly brackets, right? And what you end up is with something extremely compact, right? Very, very easy to read, right? And this is a hello world from function, right? Or ES6 function. And so let's embed this also in our index. So how about both of them, right? Let's embed both the hello class and the hello, right? Notice that it's complaining, and it's complaining because the render only takes one argument, right? So in here it looks like two different things, two different functions that you're calling, right? And so we can wrap it into a single div, right? Into a single div so that it's still one thing, right? So there we're rendering both, where they have the ES6 function and down below the class. Okay. So yeah, so this is the class implementation equivalent for this functional implementation. All right. Okay. So having looked at this, right, we want to apply some of this to start working on the assignment. So let's take a look at the assignment of what it is that we're building. Okay. So what we're building is pretty much what we built in the previous assignment, where we were dealing with users, where you can add a user, remove a user, update a user, delete a user, whatnot, right? But we're going to use that to work with courses instead. Okay, so this is basically a table of courses, right? And you can type the name of a course and click on add. It'll add a course. You're going to be saving this to the generic server that you used in the previous assignment, but instead of using the URL for users, right, you're going to be using courses, right? And you're going to be writing a service, a course service that's going to have all the CRUD operations that is going to be sending out to the server. Just like in the previous assignment, you had create user, find all users, find user by ID, update user, delete users, right? You're going to implement equivalent functions, but deal with courses, right? And you'll still be using my server, right? The generic server that allows you to create, remove, update, delete courses. Okay. So the way this works is you have three. You have a responsive design implementation where in the smallest screens it shows just the title and the buttons. If you make it a little wider, you have an extra column in there. In its widest, beyond large, right, or large and above, right, you have two additional columns like that. Okay. Also, these buttons are now going to work, right? If you click on the edit button, if you're in a row, right, it turns into an editable row where you can edit the title of the course, and it replaces the buttons with this checkbox and this delete button, right? So you can say okay, and then it saves the new title of the course to the server, or you can click on X to remove that course, okay, from the list. If you click on plus, it adds a course, with the new title of the course that you have up here, right? And if you click on the item, right, on the title, it navigates to the course editor, right? Now you're gonna have you mostly, if you have implemented at least the the HTML you already have. But notice we have another button here. Now all the other buttons, like this folder icon, doesn't really do anything, and the sorting doesn't do anything. But this one toggles between two layout versions of this component, right? This is the table component, and if you click on this, it navigates or shows the grid version of this component, right? So the grid version is a multiple rows, right? Multiple columns. Okay, although we don't use a table for this. Don't use a table for this. And which shows a grid representation of the same exact courses. Okay. In the smallest sense, when you have the smallest screen, right, you only show one course. If you make it a little wider, when you're in SM, it shows two courses. When you're a little wider, MD, middle, medium, it shows 3. When you make a little bigger, large, it shows 4. And then when it's at its widest, right, it shows 6 courses. Okay. Same, everything still works, right? Although I've shown it here only in the large screens, right? So all the courses have this edit button, right? That if you click on the bottom right, if you click on it, right, it goes into a in an editable mode, right? That allows you to either notice that the input field gets replaces the title, so you can change, right? And if you say okay, right, it actually changes the title. If you say X, right, it removes the course, right? And then when you click on that, right, it goes back to the editing mode. Okay. Right. I didn't show it in all the other ones, but it should show there for all of them. Okay. All right. So and this one, if you toggle here, it goes back to the table. If you click on the grid, it goes back to the grid. Make sense? Also, if you click here on the title, or you click here in the button, right, on the title button here, it navigates to the course editor, right? The course editor is a static version, right? The same static HTML that you implemented in the previous assignment. You're gonna bring it. You're gonna bring over that code, right? And you're not gonna change it. You're gonna put it inside of a function, right? Verbatim, the code that you wrote for the previous assignment. For assignment number 1, you're gonna bring that HTML verbatim, right? And whatever the code is inside of the body. So you don't want the headers, right? You don't want the HTML. You don't want the body, right? So you want all the content in the body. You're gonna bring it over, right? And you're gonna create the course editor, right? So you're gonna bring in everything that's in the body, right? And you're gonna paste it in the function so that you can use it as a component, as a course editor component. And it can stay static, right? You don't need to make it dynamic or anything like that, right? We're gonna make it dynamic in the next assignment, right? Not right now. Right now, it's just gonna be a static functional component. So what React encourages to do is to look at this and say, how can I build this, right? Maybe the top here could be a component, right? Maybe, and that component is shared amongst 2 folks, right? The bottom is another component. So we ask you to create this here in a course table component, right? So one of the requirements is that you create a course table component, this down here, and then you have a course row component represents each one of these rows. Okay, same thing for down here. right? You're going to have like a course grid component, right? And then each one of these is going to be like a card, a course card component using Bootstrap, a card widget, right? As a guide. All right. Okay, excellent. So what we're going to do is that we're going to get you started, right? We're going to starting today. We're going to demo how you would get started on this, and hopefully it'll get you going. You have this week, this weekend, and you have next weekend, right? And the assignment will be due that following Monday, right after that second weekend. So you have plenty of time to get working on this. And you're welcome to use all the code that I'm going to share with you today, right, to get you started. All right. Any questions before we get going? Okay, let's get going then. So what we're going to do is that we already had here a component that was created for us, right? The app component. What we're going to do is that we're going to replace this. We're just going to throw away most of the content here. Throw away, and we're going to put all our beginning code right here in this app component, right? Because it's actually very common that you have a root app component at the very top of your application, right? That contains everything else. Okay, so we'll follow that. We don't really need these two, so I'm just going to remove that. And but we are going to use the class name. We're going to use Bootstrap, right? So Bootstrap is going to have a container fluid, right? And here's where we're going to put our application, right? So this is the course manager application, and we're going to replace our div here, right? We're going to take that out, and we're just going to bring that app. Oops, there we go. Right, so this is where we're going to get started. Yeah, course manager. All right. All right, so let's take a look at the assignment. So what do we have here? So the assignment, right? So this assignment is going to have several components that we need to build, right? We need to build the course manager, and the course manager, the course manager is going to contain several things in there, right? It's going to have a course table that's going to show all these courses. It's going to have a course grid that's going to contain this grid over here, and it's going to have a course editor, right? So let's get going. Let's start building some of these things, right? So it's good practice to put all your components in a directory called components. Okay, and in here let's create a couple things. Let's create our JavaScript here, and we'll create the course manager, kind of like the overarching collection of everything, right? And in here we can create a component, okay? And the component, we'll build it. We'll say import React from React, right? And here we could use a class component. We can create a class component or function component. I prefer functional components. Up until I need a class component, I'd rather stick to a functional component, right? So let's create a simple function component that represents the course manager, right? And it's going to come back with a h1 course manager. Okay, and we're going to export this. Okay, and in our app, we'll just bring in the course manager. Notice that my IDE finds it, right, because I've exported it. And when I select it, notice that it automatically imports it. See that? Okay. And let's see what it renders. It renders the same thing, right? And what does my course manager have? Well, my course manager has those three things, right? Let's see, it has the course table, It's got the course course grid, and it's got the course editor. So let's create a couple of these. Okay, so let's create the course. Let's see, the course the course table. So it's that course table. And just to practice, I believe I asked you to implement the course table as a class and implement the course grid as a function. Okay, just to practice, right? Typically you would choose one style over the other, but so you practice, we ask you to do both. So let's create the course table using a class, right? So this would be import React again from React. And here we're going to do export default class course table that extends the React.component. There we go. Notice that I've added the export default right before the class. Again, that's also very common. Instead of exporting it down here, I've added it right before the class. And here we're going to do render, right? And we're going to return, right, an H2 maybe that says course table. And my course manager is going to return, the top level H1, and it's going to return my course table. There it is. Okay, notice that it's complaining, right? Because remember, the arrow function only works if I'm returning one thing. Okay, now it has two things. So I need to combine these into one thing so that it's still happy. What we're going to do is we're going to do this. We're going to wrap it inside of a div, right? So that again, it becomes just one thing that we're returning. Okay, so course table is going to render what? This H2. Let's see, there it is. So we have course manager, which contains a course table. Yes. All right. So let's now create the little component for the course grid. Right. So let's create the course grid. JavaScript. So this will be the course grid. Let's see, question on the chat. So we can put components inside component. Yes, I mean that's exactly, that's how you can build really large applications in terms of smaller components, right? So you can do it like we're following like a top-down design, right? Thinking about the course manager containing, these smaller components, and then those components containing even smaller components, all the way to something that's very, very minute. Okay, so yeah, so it allows you to reuse a lot of things, right? So let's take a look at course grid. Well, let's import React from React. And so let's do the course grid using a function as opposed to a class, right? So let's do const course grid. Notice the naming convention, right? This is camel cased with the first letter capitalized, whereas the files are using all lowercase with dashes, right? So course grid, this is going to be just a function, and it's going to be returning a H2 course grid. Okay, and we're going to export default course grid. So in here in the course manager, we can now bring in that course grid. Right, so we have, again, we have the course manager containing the two. Obviously, these two should not show at the same time, right? We need to be able to toggle between the two, right? So that if you're the course table, you should be able to toggle to the course grid. If you're in the course grid, you should be able to toggle to the course table, right? We'll look at that a little later. What else do we need? We also need the course editor, right? So this is the course editor. And in here, let's again import React from React. Okay, so this is going to be just a functional component, right? So const course editor. Now, what you're going to put in here is the content of whatever you have in the body. Obviously, you might need to put it inside of a div, maybe, right? And then you can paste here everything you have inside of the body of your course editor that you implemented for the previous assignment, right? You can just paste it in here. You might need to style it a little bit, right? Change the classes a little bit, maybe. Okay, but other than that, it should look identical to what you have over there, right? Right now, I'm just going to say h2, course editor, and we're going to export. Oops. Export default course editor, right? And I'm going to bring it into my course manager, right? Course editor. Okay, there it is, right? Obviously, we want to be able to toggle between the course manager and the course editor. We're going to be able to see one thing or the other, not all of them all at once, obviously, right? And that's what React Router DOM is going to allow us to do. It's going to allow us to navigate between either showing the course manager or showing the course editor or showing the course table or the grid and whatnot. Yes? Okay, so we'll do that a little later. So let's focus on course table. So a course table, what does that do? Well, it's a table, right? And so presumably you might want here a table. So it would be something like table. Okay, notice that it's complaining, right? Because again, return can only return one thing, and we're asking it to return three things, right? So again, typically what we do is that we can combine it into a div like this, right? Like that. And then we can continue looking at the content here, right? So here we might have a class name, we have table, and you might have several rows in here, right? So let's add a couple of rows. So let's see, we have maybe T body, and you might have table row. And in the row, you might have a couple of titles for courses, CS5610. You might have, what else? Who the owner is me, and 1/1/2021. And here you might have a, okay, let's look at what this looks like so far. Okay, it looks like a table, right? You have the title, me, and the date. And maybe here you might have maybe a couple of icons from Font Awesome, right? So it'd be class name, FAS, FA, maybe a check mark. So we have a check mark there. We need, what else do we need? I think we need maybe a trash can for removal, and maybe you need like a pencil for edit. Okay, there we go. So there's a couple of icons that you might use. Yes, and you might want to have several of these rows, right? So there's two rows right there. Okay, and one of them might be CS5610, and the other one might be 3200. And the owner is you, and this is 2021. Okay, so there they are, right? We have some dummy data in there. Okay, but notice that here is where React shines, right? And it forces you to think. It says, wait a minute, I copied and pasted this. That's a good flag, right? That I might not be doing it right? That ideally, what I would do is that I would, have this to be its own component, right? And actually, I do ask you to do that in the assignment, to have a separate file, which is, course row, which is going to represent an individual row. Okay, so let's do that. So we do import React from React. That is a, we'll call it course row, right? That can basically, I'm going to copy this, I'm going to paste it in here. See that, right? And then I'm going to export it, right, of the course row. So now that that's been imported and implemented, I can now replace all these 2 rows. Right, I can replace this instead of having these rows, right? That now they're gone. I can now use my course rows like that. See that? There they are. And now I have a reusable row, right? That I can very easily just render a whole bunch of them. That makes sense? Okay. Now, because of these being functions, you might say, oh, wait a minute, it'd be nice that I could pass arguments into that function and parameterize the values that are in there, right? Instead of these being hard-coded, right? I could pass here some arguments and make them parameterizable. Well, that's one of the things that React does very nicely with the extension of JSX. It says, since we use Bootstrap class table here, we don't need to import Bootstrap. Is that because we imported? Yes, we imported it earlier in the index.js, and that gets imported for everybody else. It's okay to have the T body without the T head. Yes, it's okay. Although you're going to need it, right? Because you're going to have a header at the top, right? Yeah, so we want to parameterize this. So what React, alongside with JSX, right? It allows you to map, right, these tags to functions and map attributes, right, to parameters that you can receive here, right? So this title, we can pass in, a title of, CS1234, right? The owner, let's say Alice, okay, and maybe we can copy this multiple times. Let's see. There they are. Well, actually, no, they're hard-coded here, right? It's whatever that's hard-coded. So we want to pass that in as arguments, right? So we can say, just 4, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is Alice. This is Bob. This is Charlie, and this is Dan. That as argument. So how do we do that here? Right now it's still hard-coded, right? So we can receive that as an argument here. So what React does is that it parses these attributes and it creates a little object, right? And that object gets passed as an argument to the function that implements course row. It gets passed right here. It gets passed as a map where the name is name value pair. So it'll be name value, right? So we receive an object that is going to have that, right? So we can use, but since we know it's an object and we know the structure of the object, we can use ES6. We can use ES6 to decompose or to destruct the object that we're receiving. Okay, right. So to destruct it, we can use the destruct operator, right? And then we know that the properties that are being passed are title and owner. So we want to bind the values of those properties, which are these, to variables of the same name. Right, so we can say title and owner. Okay, so now we are destructing the object that is being passed and extracting the values of those properties. We can then use this as variables in here to make this dynamic. So in here we would put maybe the variable title and owner. Let's see what that renders. That's not quite what we wanted. So we don't want really the literal string owner and title, right? So this is being interpreted as the literal string title and owner. Instead, we want these to be variables, right? So we put brackets around it to mean that this needs to be evaluated as a variable. And now there we go. See that? Those are the values that we passed in. Okay, right? Very much so. We can do the same thing with owner. There we go. Right. So there we go. We have Alice, Bob, Charlie, and Dan. Okay. Right. So same thing we can do with the last modified. Right. So we can say, 1, to 34 in the future. Right, let's copy this. Some of these bogus values. Okay, notice that we're not doing anything with it yet. Okay, but here we can receive as an argument, right, that property. And notice that I'm putting it deliberately in the wrong order, because in an object there is no order, right? You know, it's not like an array where you have an item 0, item 2, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. In an object, there is no order, right? Things are retrieved not by their index, they're retrieved by the name of the property. Okay, so even though the object that we receive is in this order, right, we can destruct it in any order whatsoever. Right, so this last modified, let's pass different values here. So this could be 2, 3, 4, and this is 12, 21, 23, 12. And this is year 2, year 1, whatever. Okay. So, and we actually have to use it, right? So let's grab last modified and let's use that as a variable. Paste that in there. And there they are, the values right there. Everybody good? Okay. All right. Okay, so let's keep going. Well, instead of having this hard-coded, right, and as just components in there, well, this could be that that this were like an array, right? If this were an array where we have courses, right, we could have the actual data in here, where we have data, maybe it's coming from the server, right? And so this might be, you know, CS, right? We have the owner, Dan, you know, Frank, and you know, last modified, right? So this is maybe, you know, 2, 3, 45. And this is 4532, 6543, and 7654. And this is Frank. This is Greg. This is Herbert. And then this is Ian. And this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And this is 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Okay. So this array now, we could use it to iterate over that array and generate this dynamically. So how do we do that? Right. We need to calculate an array of these folks, right, that can then be appended into the body. Right. So how do we do that? Well, what we do is that we're going to embed here an expression. And just like curly brackets we saw, right? We see that curly brackets allows us to escape the HTML into JavaScript, okay? And evaluate whatever that expression is. Right now, that's just a plain string. Yes, it's just a plain string. But it could be something more sophisticated, right? And so here, this curly bracket, instead of just being a string, we could put an entire expression that can evaluate to something very complex. What we're going to do is that we're going to grab the courses. We're going to grab the courses, and let's say we can iterate over it, right? And as we iterate, well, we want to iterate over each element. And as we iterate, we want to generate, right, one of these folks for every course in that array. Yes? So we want to, you know, create a lot of these, right, and append as we go, right, as many as they are in the courses. Well, what we're going to do is that we're going to use one of the functions that we learned early this week, right, that allows us to do that. You know, iterate. There was what? There was filter. There was index. You know, find index. There was map. I think map. Yeah, we'll use map. What does map do? It iterates over the courses, giving you each course one at a time. You know, passing you the course. Okay, I think this is this.courses. There we go. This that courses. And as it iterates, it passes you each one of the courses. And what we're going to do is that we're going to evaluate for each one of them. We're going to evaluate one of these guys. And grab that. I'm going to pass it. And that's what's going to return for every object. It's going to evaluate to that. Okay, so let's see what that does. There we go. See that? We've added 4 of the same of Alice over and over and over. See that? Okay. So let's make this a little more readable. Let's make this a little more readable. Okay, there we go. Okay, that's more readable. So instead of this being hard-coded strings, right, we could grab the values for the course for each one of them as it's iterating. So instead of having this, I want this to be another expression. And the expression is the evaluation of the object and its property. See that? If we go back now, notice that they right here. See this? These are all those values we just created earlier. So let's actually remove these. We don't need these anymore, right? All those are hard-coded. So I'm just going to comment that out, right? So I'm just going to end up with just those 4 that are dynamic, right? Only the title is changing here, which is these titles that we put here, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes. Now let's put the owner. Let's do the same thing for the owner. We can say instead of hard-coding Alice, we can say course and then owner. Okay, and then notice that there we go, Frank, Greg, Herbert, and Ian. And same thing with the last modified, right? We're going to say course dot last modified. There we go. See that? It's all coming back. Everybody good? Everybody still with me? All right, awesome. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. All right, so what about being able to create new courses or delete courses or edit courses? How would we do that? Well, adding a course, what we need to do is perhaps have a button that we can click to add the course. Right? So for instance, you would have a button, right, that would say maybe add course, right? And we want to click on this button and do some actions. Right, so there's our add course over here. I'm not doing anything yet. Okay, so what we're going to do is that we can assign here an event handler. We can say that on click, we want to call a function, right? And we're going to use the ES6 function, right? Where we can put here an alert like that, add course. And this is a low-level JavaScript event handler, right? It's an attribute from plain old JavaScript, which allows binding an event handler to the button, meaning that now it's going to invoke this function whenever the click event is generated on the button. Okay, so if I go back and I click, notice that it works, right? It runs that function. Okay. But instead of doing it here, I'm going to create a function outside, a proper function. Right, let's grab this, right, and just put it outside and create an actual function. So this will be, add course. It's going to be equal to that right there. Okay, so so now I can bind this function and just point it to this dot add course. Okay. Notice there's no parentheses. Careful. If I put a parenthesis there, it's going to get into an endless loop of calling this over and over and over, right? And you're going to posting in Piazza saying, oh, for some reason my screen is frozen. It's not going anywhere. It's not doing anything. And it says, well, did you put parentheses at the end of your function? Careful. Yeah, careful. Don't do that. Yeah. So let's try it again. Let's see. Add course. There we go. It works, right? So how do we do this? So typically what we would do, let's put this inside of a body, right? Typically what we would do is basically just create a new course, right? Const new course, and this could be an object that has a title. So, new course maybe, and owner, new owner, and has last modified. Yeah, never. Okay, and basically what we want to do is just append to the course. So let's do that. Let's go, courses dot push, right, the new course. Okay, and this dot courses dot push new course. See that? All right, let's try and do it. Let's refresh. Let's add course. Okay, so it doesn't seem to be working. Let's see. Let's do a console and let's see if it's actually working. So console log this dot courses. Right. So if you inspect and you put it on the right hand side, maybe like that, and you look at the console, right, and you click on courses, notice that it's 5. There's 5 elements there. So it looks like we're adding it to the array. Let's do it again. Now there's 6. Notice that it looks like it's being added. For some reason, it's not being re-rendered. And the reason it doesn't re-render is that React tries to minimize the times that it needs to update the DOM, because writing to the DOM is very expensive. Okay, it's very time consuming. So it tries to minimize and optimize when it actually needs to write to the DOM, right? So it has a very specific protocol of it knowing when does the DOM need to be updated, right? And the way it does it is that you have to explicitly tell it when the state of the component has changed. Okay. All right. So let's do that. So what we're going to do is that we are going to, to be able to handle this, right? We need to declare a variable called state. Okay. Where what we're going to do is that we're going to put the courses as part of that state. Okay. So we have now courses passes from being a variable, right, a class variable, from being a property in a class variable. Okay, right? And so we need to rehash this a little bit, right? Instead of this being this dot courses dot map, this becomes now this dot state dot courses dot map. See that? Okay, and what else? And this now becomes this dot state dot courses dot map dot push. Okay, I think let's see. Oh, it's complaining. Check. Oh yeah, it's complaining. One thing that we need to fix here is that whenever you iterate over a whole bunch of objects, and this is true for any object. This it's not because, excuse me, it's not because of the state or anything like that. Is that whenever you generate objects in an array like this, right? You have to guarantee that each element has a unique identifier. Okay, not with ID, but with another attribute specific that's called key. Okay, and key needs to be given a unique identifier. If you don't put a unique identifier, it'll fail, it'll break. Okay, now you can give it here anything that you know is going to be unique. Like for instance, I know the course title is unique. Okay, so anything you know that's going to be unique, right? So now it's not going to be complaining anymore. Okay, it doesn't complain anymore. Okay, later on, when this comes from the server, we're going to have an ID, right? Like the user ID, we're going to use that instead. All right, so we add it to the array. We have the state, okay, but this is still not working. It's still not working, right? Even though we know I know we're adding to the array, but now we just have to notify. For this to work, basically we need to now notify React that the state has changed and it is time to update the user interface. Okay, we have to tell it, hey, this is the new state, it has changed. Go ahead, re-update. So the way we do that is that we are inheriting a function called setState that we inherit from the component. Okay, we inherit that, So we can notify that the state has changed, and we're going to pass the state. Okay, this dot state. Okay, this is the new state now contains a new course, right? So let's try it out. So add course, notice that, there we go. See, we're adding new courses. It's complaining, it just complained because the two courses have the same name. See that? It's complaining that it's not unique. There we go. See, it's getting a whole bunch of warnings that I'm using the title and the title is not unique. Okay. So one option here is that because we don't have anything unique, right? We don't know that the title is going to be unique, the owner is going to be unique. One lazy way of doing it is that map, right, can pass you not only the object, right, as it's iterating, but it can also pass you the index, right, of where in the array is it, right, at position 0, position 1, position 2, position 3 as a second argument. So this would be index. Okay, but notice it's complaining. Why is it complaining? Because this syntax works in the arrow function when it's one argument, right, one parameter. But if you have two parameters, then it's syntax error, right? You have to add the parentheses, right, because you have more than one argument. See that? Now it works. Now I can use index as the actual key because I know it's unique within this array, right? So it's now notice that now it's not complaining. Everybody good? Okay. All right. So one problem here, though, right? One big problem is that this array is actually, right? This array is actually shared amongst two components. It's shared in the table component, but it's the same exact data structure that the grid is supposed to render, right? Both of them, the course table renders the same array as a table, but the course grid renders the same exact array, but as a grid, right? So declaring the state here is very inconvenient, right? Because there's no way for these folks to talk to one another. They're siblings. These are siblings. For them to be able to share the same piece of information, that we would need to declare the data structure above, so that it's common to both of them, right? So ideally, this state wouldn't live here. Instead, it would live above me in the course manager, right? So the course manager could declare the array, right, and then share their array with both of them, right? So let's do that. Let's do that. Okay. So now here's the problem. One of the limitations of a function components like this one is that they cannot have a state, right? Actually, they can, right? Later on, we'll take a look at hooks, right, which allow you to have state, but we haven't introduced that yet, right? That's a little advanced. We'll talk about that a little later. Okay, but I just want to point out that one of the challenges of functional components like this is that they don't have a state. All right. So what do we do? Well, the easy way is to just convert this into a class component. Convert it back into a class component because we needed to declare a state, right, so that we can share it with these two down here. Right. So let's fix that. All right. Let's convert this. Let's see. This is going to be a class. Okay. It's going to extends React.component, right? And there's a curly bracket. You're going to have a render, right? And it's going to have a return. And in here, we're just going to move this div in there. Okay, we're back where we started, right? But now this is a class component instead of a functional component, right? We're still in business, right? All right, so let's now try to move this state. We're going to move it above the course manager so that both we can then pass it down to the course table, right, for rendering. So let's do that. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to declare it up here. See that? Okay. And and then I can pass the courses down to both of them. I can pass this dot can't see this dot state dot courses to both of them. I can pass it down to both of them like that, right? Which contains the array. So here, I don't need the state anymore, right? I don't need the state anymore. So let's remove the state. Let's remove the state. Instead, I am receiving the courses as a somehow I'm receiving it here. How am I receiving it? How do I get it here? Because this is not a function, right? We were able to pass this down because we were a function. Yes, and we can receive it as an argument. But here, we are a class. So how do we receive that? How do we receive it? The way we receive it is in the constructor, right? When we get instantiated, right, the constructor, we are passed, okay, we are passed properties, properties, okay. This, right, this in the course manager, these are properties that are being passed. So courses is one of the properties, okay. And one of the things we need to do is copy those properties and pass them to our super constructor, right? That's part of the fact that we are extending the component, and the component expects the constructor to pass the properties to itself. Okay? Okay, now we have the properties. We have the properties. And in those properties, we have all the properties that you would pass me. Now, props in this case would be courses or anything else. Yeah, we would be passing here, right? So props.courses is here. We can actually print it. You can say console log properties. Let's see. Can I have no. And oh, okay. Wait a minute. This dot yada yada yada. Where is it? Cannot read. Oh yeah, probably because right we have the courses, but we're iterating over the maps. See that? We're iterating over the maps, but we don't have a state anymore, right? The state is gone. We moved it over to the parent. What we instead have here are properties. What properties? The courses property. Right, so now we have this, the property that we just passed into here, right? And we can extract that property using the same keyword. This dot, instead of this dot state, we can say this dot props dot courses. Okay, let's see. There we go. We're back in business. Okay, we're back in business. Okay, right? So basically now we're sharing the courses from our parent, pass it to us, but now it's part of a property. And the good thing about this is that now our parent can also share the same courses with our sibling, CourseGrid, which CourseGrid is not doing anything with it, right? Luckily, CourseGrid is implemented like a function, not implemented like a class, right? So because CourseGrid is a function, it doesn't have a constructor, right? Unlike our sibling, the table, which is a class, and it's receiving the properties through the constructor. Here, because we're a function, we're going to receive it. We're going to receive it as an object that we can destruct and just be able to receive it here, right? So let's render it. Let's render it. How do we render it? Let's first put this in here like that. Let's make sure that we have courses here. Let's see, courses dot length. Let's see how let's make sure that we're getting some something in here. Let's see. There we go. So yeah, we have 4 courses there. See that? So let's render it. Let's render it like a card using Bootstrap. Let's see, Bootstrap cards. Let's see, cards. Okay, there's a card, right? So let's just copy this. Let's copy this. So we want to grab courses and iterate over the courses and render a card. So let's just render one card. Let's see. Looks like we have some errors here. Div, class name, card, blah, blah, blah. Source, we don't have an image. So let's remove that image. Let's remove that image. And div, blah, 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 blah. Let's see how it renders. EM, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it doesn't like these styles. So let's take out the style here. Actually, no, it's actually this is a good learning experience. So in React, the style attribute can no longer be a string, right? Like you would in just plain old HTML. It needs to be an object. It needs to be an expression. And here, so this would be an object of which the first one is an attribute, and the second one is the value of that attribute, just like a JSON object, right? Where this is a property and the value is a string. Okay, so that should fix that. There we go. There we have a card here. See that? A card. We have a card. And how many cards do we want? Right, we want as many cards as there are courses, right? So let's do that. We can do a map. We can do courses.map course, and for each course, what we want to do, we want to render one of these. All right, so let's move it in there. There we have it, right? So we have that many cards. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 cards. Right? We don't want to render it that way, but we can fix that. That's okay. Maybe the style. Let's take out the style. Let's see what it does. Okay, it just takes up the entire width of the screen. But we know how to fix that. We know how to fix that. We can have maybe a row. Maybe we can have a row, div class a row. Okay. And then each one of these could be inside of a column, right? So this could be a div, and then close that, a div down below. And this could be a column, class, column, maybe size 3. Okay, there we go. So we have now that many columns, right, in there. So we have 4, or we can make them a little bigger so it doesn't fit. Right, so now it just spills over because it's 12 divided by 4. It's only 3 cards across, right? And actually this should live its own component, right? In its own functional component, like a card component. So this could be like a course card, right? Where we can, declare here, in React, from React, that declares a function called course component, right? That just renders one of these, renders one of those, right? And then we can extend here or export default the course, course component. What did I call it? No, this is called course card, right? Course card, right? And then in here we can import that, right? We can import the course card here, and we're back where we were. Oops. There we are, right? We're back where we started. Okay, and notice that now we have, right? Obviously, the course card can, right, instead of course title, we can grab the course title, right? If we pass the course as an argument, right? We can pass in the course as an argument in the destructor course. As we iterate, right, we can pass the course down to the to the course card, right? And then render the title. So now there we go. See the title, see title over here. See that? So now we're rendering the same information, right, across two components. We just need to be able to toggle, right, and show one or the other. Okay. Notice that add actually doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. It doesn't work because in the course table, in the course table, we're adding to a local state that we don't have, right? We're adding to a course table that does the state that doesn't exist. So all these event handlers are trying to manipulate a state that has been moved to our parent, right? So this course really should also be moved to our parent, right? Because our parent has a state now, right? So it needs to have all the functions that manipulate that state, right? That manipulate that state. But add course is being called from where? It's being called, well, I mean, it depends, right? We could move this button, right? Instead of living down inside the table, we can also move that button to our parent. Maybe put it, I don't know, maybe here, right? Let's see if that breaks. So if we add a course, okay, notice that we added a course, and now it's being added in two places, right? The course table is rendering, and the course grid is rendering. So let's add another one. There we go. See that? We got a new course down here, and it's the same course down that's propagating down to both our children, right? Both down to the course table and to the course grid. They're both getting their values, right? And re-rendering the whole thing. Make sense? Right? Now, one of the challenges is that right, we're going to need to be able to edit, maybe remove a course from way down in the child, because notice where we would put the delete. The delete would be way down here, right? So maybe down in grid, right? When you're in the course card, in here you would maybe have a delete button somewhere in here, right? Maybe way down here, like I class, FAS, FA trash, right? Trash here, but you want to, how do you somehow you need to where's the state? The state is way up there. My parent, right? My parent way up there. The course manager has a state. So somehow I need to delete or splice away, an array here. I'm going to splice it away, but it has to be done here. Now, how do we communicate back and forth? You need to have something like a delete, delete course, right? And you have to tell me which course you want me to delete. And then I need to kind of like recalculate the state, right? You need to recalculate the state so that the new state doesn't have the course that you're trying to remove, right? But how do I pass you the course that I want to, if I want to do console, I want to be able to invoke this delete function from way down here in the course card or in the course row. So the only way to do that is to pass down the function to everybody who wants to invoke it. So delete course, I'm going to pass it a reference to both, right? This dot delete course, right? Down to my children, delete course. So delete course, this delete course, oops. Okay, I'm passing an argument, a reference. So in course table, now in my properties, I have a reference to that property you passed me, delete course. Well, I'm going to pass it down to the rows. I'm going to pass it down to delete. I'll pass it down to the row, which is going to be this props delete course. Okay, and then in course row, I'm going to receive it here, delete course. I can now link the trash so that if I click on the trash, I'm going to invoke this delete course, right? So I can say on click on the trash, I want to invoke the delete course. Okay. Let's see if that works. Let's see if that works. Let's go on the console. Let's click on the trash. There we go. See that? We are invoking it. We are invoking it. Not quite sure what we're passing. We're passing some event. But we are able to invoke it inside of course manager line 27. It's that console, delete course. But really we want to pass the course. So how do we pass the course? Well, actually, we don't have a course, right? We don't have a course to pass. So it'd be nice if the table would have passed us the actual course, right? Which is a reference to the course, right? I can receive it here. I can say course. Now I have the course that I can pass around to the delete. You can say, well, I want to delete this course. Careful what I'm going to do here. Look, right? I'm going to do a parentheses. If I do this, that's going to go into an endless loop. Okay, careful, right? If I do this, it's going to go into an endless loop, right? So don't do that. So first, put it inside a wrapping function. Then I can put a parenthesis here, right? Okay, be careful there, right? If you want to invoke a function and want to pass something to it, you need to put it inside of a anonymous function, in a lambda. Otherwise, you're going to end up in an endless loop, right? And so, okay, what we're passing the course. Okay, let's try it again. Go in the console, right? Click on that. There we go. See that? We are getting the object of the course that you want to remove, right? CS4321. Click on that one. There it is, right? It's CS7654. So we are passing the object itself. So how do we remove the object? How do we remove the object? Well, the way we're going to remove it, is we're going to filter. We're going to calculate a new array from the old array. So we have the old array. We're going to calculate a new array. We're going to filter out the course we don't want. Okay, right? So let's do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say const, right? Const new courses is going to be the old courses. And I'm going to filter out courses. I'm going to filter, right? From the courses, I'm going to keep the ones where the so this is the course to delete. So this is course to delete, right? I'm going to keep only the ones that are different from the course that I want to delete. So I only want to keep the ones that if the course is not the course to delete, then I want to keep it. Okay, so new courses, there it is. And then I can just set the state. I can say this dot set state, right? And the new state is a new object that has where the courses are now the new courses. And so we're re-updating it. Let's see. Let's try it again. Let's refresh. And let's remove. There we go. See that? We're removing, and it's removing it from both places. See that? It's removing from both places. Right? I can remove it here. Right? Does that make sense? All right. So I'm out of time, but definitely play around with this. Right? Get your hands on this. Start playing around with it, and practice it. And send small messages back and forth. Call functions from the components down below. See if you can pass back and forth information between the components up and down the hierarchy. Okay, and the more you practice, the more this will become second nature to you. All right. Also, we're going to be practicing this over and over and over, throughout the semester, and so and certainly you'll catch on, as you get more chances to practice it and practice it and practice it. Okay. All right. Excellent. Any questions? Right,
Hi,
folks.
Jules.
Yes.
Can I ask, why is that delayed? I mean, can you show the screen again?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, you said if we add the parentheses, this will be in the infinite loop, and we add parentheses and lambda and try to call the function, and then it works. Yeah, here. Why this way works? But
Yeah,
instead
so
if we don't.
right. So
Yeah.
what's going to happen if you remove this? Right. This function is going to be invoked immediately. Right. So just like you would put a function and you call it, any function that this syntax is to invoke a function, right? So if you remove this, the function will be invoked immediately, right? And what this does is that it's going to invoke a state change, right? In the manager, it's going to cause a state change over here. It's going to change the state, which is going to cause a re-rendering, and that re-rendering is going to re-render this course row. Is going to be reinstantiated, and it's going to call this function again. Okay, which is going to cause a re-rendering, which is going to instantiate this, and is going to call the function again. So it's going to go over and over and over until the browser crashes. It says, maximum recursive blah 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 stack has been full. Right. What this does is it says that I am not invoking. I am delegating this to later until the event gets invoked. Then I will invoke this function.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, that's the difference.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Anything else? All right, then I'm going to push this to a Git repository, and then you can clone it down and start playing around with it on your own. Okay.
Professor, a quick question. So
Yes.
when we used the filter function at the end, could we have used the splice function as well there? Because
yes, you could have used a splice. Yes.
yeah, okay. Because filtering through many of the data sets would be computationally expensive if we have a large data set, right?
Yes, of course. Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right. Sure. All right, everybody. Thank you. Good night.
Hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
I just joined the course, so is it okay if I stay after to just go over a few things with
Sure.
you?
Thanks, Professor. Take care.
Sure. Good night. Bye-bye. Sure. What's up?
Yeah, so essentially for on the Canvas, there's a couple of assignments that were due already, like before I joined yesterday.
Yep.
So is it okay if I, is there like a timeline, or do you have like, just to, like, what's my timeline to like get them in and
Yeah. So of course we'll work with you, and we'll waive the late penalties for the first two assignments, and so give you a chance, obviously, to catch up, and so if you could try and start committing the first assignment, see if you can have that within the next week or so, and obviously the intention is that hopefully by the end of the third assignment you'll be all caught up, and we're willing to waive some of those be lenient, right, for these first 2 or 3 assignments as you catch up. Just make a private post on Piazza, and just keep the TAs and myself up to date of how you're doing, right? If you feel that you're going to be able to deliver this by the end of I wouldn't imagine that you're going to be able to deliver this this third assignment by the due date on Monday. So probably you need another couple more days to deliver that as well. So how about the timeline would be, deliver the first assignment for, what day's today? Today's Wednesday. Can you have the first assignment done by next Monday, say? And then the second one by the end of next week, and then the third by the middle of next week, or the following week. So let's make a private post on Piazza, and keep the conversation there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. And the last thing was about the quiz. Do I just put that as a private post as well?
Yes, please.
Okay. And is private post on, or just Piazza in general, is that the normal?
To send it to instructors so that all the instructors are aware, including the TAs.
Okay. And so, okay, so that's the general communication line as opposed
Yes,
to
please
email.
stick to Piazza. Don't send emails or stuff like that. Piazza, everything that has to do with the course, please use Piazza.
Okay, and my last question is, I noticed that you're using IntelliJ,
Yeah.
and I've usually used VS Code. Is it like just strongly recommended, required?
It's not required. It's strongly recommended. It has very strong support for all the tools that we're using, and autocomplete and debugging and stepping through the code. It's just very, very. I mean, VS Code, you can also use it. You would have to install a whole bunch of other tools and plugins, and yeah, just IntelliJ already has it all done. So
Oh, okay. All right, perfect. Thank you
okay,
very much. I appreciate it.
all right. Good luck.
Have a good night.
Good night.